What you do is you vote on it with that taken out completely, and then you just fall to the straight light industrial.
Right, but then we're without the stoplight, for sure.
Yeah, well, the stoplight might not come for 20 years anyway, so if something's built, you could approve a gas station, they might not build a gas station.
Mhm. I see what you're saying.
Could staff go over barring no gas station turning to commercial? That was an ask of the PUD. What other things in the application results in a PUD?
It's a setback.
It's
So
just setback.
What kind of PUD flexibility are they asking for?
Right.
Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there's the slide. So the gas station is one. They want to be able to develop in advance of municipal sewer and water being available. They want some parking setbacks from Highway 55 and 62nd. They also want building setbacks on the north side from 62nd. They want the wall signage to be split between the north and south elevations. We only allow signage on one elevation under our code. The next one you can ignore. They want flexibility on building materials that aren't specifically listed in our code, that insulated metal material for the north side of Kimberly. They want to be able to take the required number of trees and shrubs. They're meeting the number of trees, but they want to apply them across the site, not necessarily lot by lot. They want to apply the impervious surface. They'll comply, but they want to do it on a set project-wide basis, not lot by lot. They want to create Outlot A for us for our well site without frontage on a public street, and they want the parking reduction for lots 2 and 3, which we talked about.
Did you have a?
Most of these other things could be handled with variances though, right? What couldn't be handled with the variance?
I would, as a city planner, when you have more than 2 variances in a project, you should be looking at a PUD. This many variances, what are the physical constraints that justify all of these variances, like the wall sign? What is the physical, I mean, maybe the landscaping requirement that potentially can be a site constraint arguably, especially with the road, but some of the setbacks, I would argue that that's like parking setbacks with the physical constraint of the lot that says the parking has to be reduced.
Can you tell me how many of these things have not been asked for in prior project variances, not by this applicant, but by other applications that have come before us? Because some of these things have come before us, right? Setbacks from roads and
Do you
whatnot.
want me to answer that?
Sure, go ahead, sorry.
So what's unique is what I really want to know to this one, that other than things that we haven't seen in the past that we've probably approved.
Right. I think we have approved the first one recently to allow development without sewer and water. The setbacks, I think there are unique things that could be a variance, but we've approved setback flexibility in a PUD. We've also done it by variances. There is a pinch point, as we talked about with Wagon Wheel.
And I do want to point out some of the setbacks, some of the setback flexibility there would potentially benefit from bringing away from the houses.
Correct.
So it's a
Correct.
little bit of give and take.
Yeah.
The wall signs, we haven't had that specific request for flexibility, but we've definitely given wall sign variances. The metal panels is new. That's the first request, but I don't think that's the last one. It's a new material that we're seeing more of, and our code just doesn't reflect it. We haven't seen the landscape flexibility being applied across a project, but we haven't really had a industrial project like this where you might see that, and the desire benefits, I think, the neighbors by allowing them to shift that. We haven't seen the impervious across the site, but again, we have seen that, I'm sorry, we did grant that with Corcoran Farms, I believe. And creation of a lot without frontage, I don't think we've seen that or the parking reduction yet. But again, we haven't done a lot of commercial development, yet, commercial industrial development yet.
Okay. I thought we did have a different material with Nelson, didn't we?
We actually didn't, they asked for this material and we denied it
Oh, yeah,
for them. I think it's harder to meet the variance standard than to ask for it with the PUD.
What did we do on garages?
They met the industrial standards. They
Okay.
have a block or brick, I can't remember what their materials are, but they comply. Lap siding on theirs, they have a
Okay.
residential standard, so they complied.
So to me, I guess there's some of this comes down to is what warrants the PUD versus them not doing a PUD and going with straight industrial zoning. How does that look?
I think the setbacks get, well,
The setbacks get bigger. The material-
true, but also from 55,
Yeah.
probably the most, I would think.
I think without this flexibility related to setbacks, I think it would be very difficult to develop it as a functional industrial building. The depth of the industrial buildings is a pretty standard building, and without that flexibility, I think it would be challenging to find tenants that could function as an industrial user. I do think the flexibility on that setback would be difficult to avoid. And whether you could meet the variance standards for that setback is something that would need to be evaluated.
I think the developing in advance of city services would also be a challenge with the variance. I think that's why we directed them to use the PUD route. Because at the concept stage, they asked us to weigh in which route is most appropriate for them to try to follow as they proceed.
Yeah, we said PUD. Or variances.
Didn't we do garages plus though, not as a PUD? And then we did that,
Garages too?
or garages too?
That came in under standard zoning, I thought. Let me check.
That was development in advance of city sewer and water as well.
That was a variance in
Okay.
advance of city sewer and water, but I thought.
They're not
garage-
even using any cities.
Yeah, they didn't need it.
They
No.
don't need it.
They weren't gonna use any water,
So they didn't do septic. They just, yeah.
how did we, yeah, there's so many more questions.
So I think what we have agreed on so far is a desire to create the ability to do the double row of landscaping. So I will propose that I will move that we amend Resolution 2023-03 to include a requirement that a double row of landscaping be provided on the north side of 62nd, and the road be shifted to accommodate.
So would you be modifying condition D, what is that, X, on page 3, the top of page 3?
It would fit there,
Is that your motion?
yes.
Okay, do we have a second? Or Kendra, do you have a question?
Yeah, are you deleting X or saying landscaping in a double row of landscaping and/or? Or is it a larger, I'm just trying to figure out, do you want to modify this condition or delete it and replace it with yours? And add shift the road 5 feet, or shift the road south as much as possible?
I don't want to exclude a fence, but I think there should also be a double row of landscaping, whether the fence is there or not.
Add a double row of landscaping and/or solid wall, low-maintenance fencing to provide screening on the north side of Kimberly Lane. A minimum of 300, it's not 30, 300 feet from Pioneer to provide screening of the existing homes. Work with staff to shift the road south to accommodate this.
Would the 300 feet still work? I thought Kevin was saying like 288.
Well, 300 feet, I meant to make sure it went the width of those homes on Wagon Wheel.
Oh, like an east to west 300
Yeah,
feet?
Yeah.
He was
Okay.
talking north-south,
Okay.
Pioneer.
Yes,
So is that your motion?
yes.
Okay, motion, do we have a second? All second it. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I don't know if we got everyone, we at least got 3.
Did anyone abstain?
Oh, might just not have heard.
We're just talking landscaping right now.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure we heard the vote.
And then the other amendment that I'll offer on the same resolution is to add to item 16 that signs visible from residential properties to the north, east, or west shall not be illuminated after 9 PM.
Can I make a friendly amendment to that?
Sure.
Could we change it to all wall signage? That would include the signage on 55.
What was your motion, Jeremy?
Just to the north, east, and west, so that, I thought signage toward 55 would make sense to have on if they needed that, just because it's a major highway that's lighted anyway, but
What time did you say?
till 9 PM.
Right.
Yeah, I think it would be so striking to have a big wall sign on 55 at that time of night. There is residential to the south side of 55. It's just our neighboring city. So
Dope. Do you accept the friendly?
I guess I would. It seems to me like because it's a major arterial road, that lighting toward it makes more sense than the other sides, but I'm not gonna say no if you'd like to see that changed.
I think it makes sense because it's industrial. If it was commercial, retail, I probably wouldn't make that amendment. Ask you to.
Okay.
Yep. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a quick question to
Yes.
clarify. When can they come on in the morning?
6 AM.
Good point. So, make friendly to the friendly.
Yes.
The-
I'm gonna vote no on that, because it seems silly that you're protecting them from a light of a building when they're right next to Highway 55,
Well, light
on
intrusion,
the south side. There's like-
light travels a lot further than noise.
I just, there's one house south of it, south of the whole project within. That's the housing landscape. There's that house.
There's a home over here.
Where?
This property, it's this property too.
There's nothing there.
There's a home right there.
I know this is riveting.
Solution?
Sure.
Maybe. John Roush, one of the landowners. What we would propose is to limit substantially the number of lumens, big word, but lumens that leave the property, towards any of the residents after even, less than 9, dark. It's dark at 5 in the winter, so we don't want lights blaring at them. But Pella's proud, the only reason they're coming here, this is their corporate headquarters, they're leaving Plymouth. They do want some visibility on 55, they want that brand recognition. So that would be important to them, just to have, some lighting headed that way. And it's not gonna be blaring, it's gonna be, I think, akin to that yellow sign, and, we'll have them turn down the, the lights, the number of bulbs, for sure, facing north, east, towards the residents, and even, if there's anything going the other way with future clients. So just possibly, we could work with staff to reduce the number of lumens that leave the site after business hours. Maybe it's different in the winter than in the summer too, 9 o'clock in the summer.
Not the first time it's happened. no.
Probably isn't that important versus 9 o'clock in the winter when I'm in bed at least, but just a
Thank you.
solution,
Okay.
possibly.
Thoughts on that?
So if it's only to the south, like I said before, I'm fine lighting to the south. I'd have to see what that would look like from the other directions and where that sign would be if that would have a negative impact on the residents in our city. I'd want to avoid that.
So we can vote on the amendment, I think.
Do we have?
Well,
do we have
can I
motion?
ask the applicant? a question?
Yeah, with further discussion.
If the lighting on 55 has a different timing than the lighting on the north and east side of the building, would you be fine with that? Let's say the lighting on the south, on 55, either goes down or goes off at like 10 o'clock?
I don't want to speak for Pella, or not Pella, but I know they're really concerned about, their corporate.
I get that,
So-
and
What if they did 24 hours that way, and then the west, east, and north shut off?
but who's gonna see it at 3 in the morning? Who's it benefit?
I mean, probably, I think for them, it's just a big brand recognition. I mean, they're a quasi-retailer, they advertise on TV, radio, et cetera, and they do have a big brand recognition that they want people when they're replacing their windows to think of Pella.
Yeah,
So
I
just some
c-
of that traffic, I think, for them is really important as another source of advertising, if you will, when they're moving their corporate headquarters from Plymouth to that 55 exposure is important to them.
People who sign the big checks care about that stuff.
I get that, but to me, it's more of something that you're imposing on somebody, have a light on 24/7, a wall light, you know? And I could see it more if it's retail, but as a commercial building,
What about off during those hours for the north, east, and west, and reduced lumens on the south?
I'd be fine with that, reduced lumens like after 10 o'clock.
Mr. Mayor, could I just?
Yeah.
Our lighting code actually does require, depending on the different type of light source, we have a pretty detailed sign ordinance that requires between sunrise and sunset lights to be turned down. And so our building of, Mike, whatever his title is, construction supervisor, and Natalie, when they review the sign permits, do look to make sure we've got that gauge. And so we do require them to be turned down from, Candela, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but a pretty significant downturn after dark anyway. So I think we have that requirement. If you did leave it on 55, we would require that they have that on there anyway. Again, this is for new signs, since this ordinance has been adopted. So certainly you can see signs in town that don't comply. But I just wanted to say, we do have something in the code that requires the lighting to be dimmed between sunset and sunrise anyway.
So by putting something in, requiring them to be off in the north, west, and east at those certain hours at night,
The south is covered. by
code
the
should take
ordinance.
care of the south.
Okay.
And I'm fine with them, I know it's not part of your amendment, but I'm fine with a monument sign that's no taller than a certain level, so trucks coming after dark know that that's the Pella building within the street, you know what I mean?
With keeping that in regards to illumination, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
but
I would suggest
Fine
we
with it off,
withdraw
too.
the motions and make a new one just to be clean, because
well, I don't think they have a monument sign proposed, do they? Or you
I
do?
believe they do.
Do you know the height of it?
It's less than 10 feet. It's in the northeast corner of their lot too, so as far as possible from the resident.
Almost where it cul-de-sacs are there.
They're allowed up to 16 feet under the code, a 16-foot-high sign.
16 feet, okay.
It sounds like they may
Why
not
don't
be
we stick with-
proposing that.
Why don't we
but-
stick with what
The
you,
original.
yeah, you made.
Could you restate it?
So that we add a condition that illuminated signs on the north, west, and east sides of the building are turned off after 9 PM.
Until
And
6
remain
a.m.
off until 6 AM.
And then the code would impact that potentially in terms of reducing the lighting before that, even in winter, let's say.
Correct.
Okay. Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I might have missed it. Did I get everyone? John, I'm the worst at picking you up, John.
It's a sign.
Alrighty. Okay, so we got that item discussed. Really,
So the only topic we haven't been able to find any improvement to is traffic.
yeah,
And we may not be able to, but I'm very open to suggestions.
And, Mr. Mayor, the applicant did ask for flexibility on 11C that I did not.
The parking.
I flagged that. I didn't include that in my staff report. Staff report still says they need to comply with the parking requirements. I just wanted to highlight that because it was a
Well,
change that came up
Thank you.
tonight.
Let's tackle the parking one first.
Yeah, I'm fine with less parking in general. After the pandemic, I think we need to reassess our parking requirements, because I think probably fewer people typically in most offices than there would have been before. And I'd rather see that be open prairie than paved asphalt. If we can save ourselves a quarter of an acre of parking and have some more habitat, I think that's a positive.
I think as long as staff's comfortable, which it sounds like they are, with being enough, I'd be okay with it. Anyone else?
The current maps show that parking?
I believe so.
Right, so I would recommend that 11C be modified to say parking for lots 2 and 3, Block 1 is granted PUD flexibility to require a minimum of 1 space per 2,000 square feet for warehouse uses. This would require 6 parking spaces for Phase 1 and 2 on Lot 3. Proof of parking for 46 spaces shall be preserved. The parking demand shall be reevaluated with the Phase 2 construction to assure that adequate parking is provided. The city may require construction of the proof of parking stalls if a parking demand is documented.
Heck of a motion, but I make it.
You beat me to it. I'll second it. Any
Is
further?
there any, is there implied in there? I just want to make sure, like, there's no implied if you have less parking, you'll be able to put more buildings on? Because I know you said you wanted habitat, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those parking spaces will be taken by habitat. It just, maybe it may mean that they put a bigger building on the site or whatever, like,
Well,
Square footage would require more parking then at that point.
well, they're
Yeah.
asking for an exception to the whole parking concept.
You're asking for-
well, but if they added more square footage, it would still add some.
Yeah, I'm just asking, is
Yeah.
it, that, like, is it a true freebie where we just say less parking and they put more trees up? It doesn't seem like that's what actually is happening.
Not necessarily more trees, I wouldn't think, but,
I'm just saying.
yeah.
I'm using trees as an example. Like, is
They-
that actually covered?
They still have to comply with the formula. We're just changing the formula from 1 space per 1,500 square feet for the warehouse uses to 1 space per 2,000. So if they do add more building, they still have to add more parking to support that. They're showing proof of parking that they believe would accommodate the future expansion. And again, that will come back with a PUD final plan and final plat.
Oh, okay.
And as long as it's complying with that formula for parking, it's not a free-for-all. They still have to comply.
Cities do seem to waste a lot of space on parking in general.
Well, yeah.
We did have a motion and a second. So is there anything further on that? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Okay.
Get that man a green flag and a red flag.
Yeah.
Need one of those Jeopardy button systems. Okay, so the last one is the big one, traffic. Now that we've found a,
I wish there was a way we could control traffic going up Pioneer from this development, though.
The problem with every single thing, like, I carry this plat map with me. This is from, like,
1800.
1873 in Corcoran, and there were, in this area of Corcoran, the average lot size was 60 acres. So you can go online and get them. Every single time anything has been done in our town,
Cool.
it increases traffic counts. Like, to a certain degree, all of your houses increase traffic counts on Pioneer. Your 2 houses increase traffic counts. I approved, and I've been in all your shoes. When I was on council, we got an application for a housing development right behind my house. And it was a ton of houses, and it was like right at my deer stand is where the new next housing development was coming in. And I had to approve it. and it sucked. It was my worst day on city council. And I didn't own the land. People said it would increase traffic. Because I could make the argument it disallowed me from the enjoyment of my property. All the same stuff. And you could have made the same argument when you guys moved in. And it's just, anytime anything is done, and those original people probably had a beef with any new development that had less than 10 acres, that increases traffic. And there has to be a reasonableness to how much does it impact. We can't have no impact to anybody, because otherwise we had 20 families that lived in Corcoran at one point. I have that map too. So there might not be anything we can do to have zero impact to traffic for the rest of our time on council. We can try really hard, and it's folly to say that we do the best we can to lessen the impact, which I think we've done. But I voted for that development right behind my house, and it impacted me in a negative way. And
I hear you.
we can't always
There's a limit to what we can do.
We can't impact people zero.
Right.
That person has a right. That's been coded to be industrial for 20 years. They have a right to do that.
It's not gonna go back and forth.
So it's challenging to have, we either call it quits on anything new in Corcoran, because it will impact all of us, or have some sort of reasonableness and allow people to do something with the property they own. That's within the code.
Yeah. Fair point.
I still want to light before I say yes to this.
Make a motion.
I think my recommendation, if that's the case, would still be to table it and get more information on what those uses could be. I don't know how else we do that.
Kendra, if you could help me, or somebody could help me, I would like to make a motion
Motion to table?
to table with the direction of how can we get a light at Highway 55 and Pioneer?
Well, I think we did have a meeting, and we can do that. You can table, we can bring it back, and we can ask our traffic engineer to provide sort of a list of uses, but I can tell you what verbally he said is the list of uses is a gas station or a high-traffic retail user, which is likely a restaurant. So I think happy to do that, but he did say that an industrial user on this Lot 1 that we're talking about will not trigger the signal.
What about like a pharmacy or a?
He did not believe that would meet warrants. That would not drive enough traffic. We could have him, he did not run it officially, so we could ask him to try to run those numbers and bring those back. His feeling was that was not going to meet warrants.
How much to install a traffic light there?
You gotta get approval.
It's not the money.
Yeah, I think the
Kevin can't just
obstacle
go hang a
is
traffic.
the right to build it in the MnDOT's right away. I think what I heard from the developer is they would prefer that. The only obstacle to
I'm
that is
asking just
MnDOT.
general questions. How much would it take? What would it take to put a light there, even though 55, or the state says no?
Well, we can't because it's their right away. We don't own the property. So the only obstacle to a signal under the, I guess, industrial use, it's MnDOT saying no.
I know.
So again, we talked about this a little at the Plan Commission, but I'll just say it just to be clear, because we don't do a lot of signals on highways. But if we felt that it met warrants, which we did for the gas station, with the gas station, we would have required as city staff a signal, and MnDOT knows that, and they reviewed our plans, and they said, okay, you can require that, but you still have to do what they call the ICE study, which is the study that they need to do to show that it actually does meet their warrants. And until that's done and passes, even if we said our traffic study shows that it meets warrants, we can't do it. So they still need to say yes. And then, it's somewhere in the ballpark of, what did we say the other day, 1.5 million,
Over $1 million,
something? But,
depending on what year it got built. I mean,
but even if the developer said, we'd be willing to install that, we can't take the money because MinDOT won't let us.
I
We can't make that a
understand all.
requirement.
So how confident are we for sure, and I think we're past the gas station point, but just out of my curiosity, if we were to have approved it with the gas station for the light, is there a possibility that that ICE number would have come back not actually meeting the warrants, and then what would have happened?
I think based on the information that he shared, and we've shared this with MinDOT, a gas station would trigger the warrants. It's not borderline. And in a high user commercial would likely do it. Now, there's some variation in that. A pharmacy would be very borderline. So we don't want, and that would be on a very specific, they wouldn't even let us, start the ICE study until we actually have a final plat with a specific user.
Wow.
They typically require it when there's a problem, then they allow you to do it. We've met with them, they said they would likely consider using forecasted stuff to start the ICE study. And that once you start the ICE study, it's almost 2 years before you can actually get the signal through their process. So they've moved kind of a subtle goalpost to say, on forecast basis, we'll let you start the ICE study. What that means, our interpretation of that is, when we come in with a final plat with a specific user, then we can justify it. They won't do it at preliminary plat. They won't allow us, at least based on our conversations to date, we've had multiple, they won't even allow us to do it on a forecast basis till there's a real user.
I don't want to put any more traffic into this neighborhood, but I still want a light, so it doesn't sound like I'm going to get anywhere with that. And I'm trying to help the neighbors, and I'm trying to help the developer. I wouldn't want to be there if I couldn't get out on the Highway 55 as a business. What a mess. John, when are we going to make it Bottom of County?
I don't know.
That wouldn't help.
That,
Yeah, we
I
need
still
bottom of
don't
state.
control Highway 55.
I know
It's
you
my
don't.
county.
I know you don't.
We can do go ahead. One question.
Reference to fatality, the number was not known. There is government money in place for certain areas where safety checks should have been looked at and assessed.
That's
That
part
might
of,
already warrant it because of the number of fatalities in this area.
I don't think that's part of the ICE study, I believe factors in safety at the intersection.
There was one on the Corcoran side of 55, to Matt's knowledge, in the last 20 years. And that was not at that intersection. It was a different intersection.
There was two of them 2 years ago.
Again, I think that's.
Yeah, that was it,
be
but
included
that's
in that
not,
study.
that's not the same intersection though, is it?
It was a block away.
150 feet away.
I get it. I get that.
And there is a signal there.
Yeah.
There isn't? I thought there was.
There's no signals till
No,
then.
no signals till 19. And then a couple recently on Rolling Hills Road and 55 too, but that's Medina.
They're talking, yeah. When you're talking about dangerous intersections, it's the specific intersection.
Yep, I know.
But we only have Corcoran data and not Medina data
Yeah.
on that intersection, the one you're talking about.
Does that axle limit get us any sort of control?
Not really.
Not really.
Why wouldn't it axle limit?
Most of it's gonna be car traffic. I think most of these people are probably concerned with the additional amount of cars coming out of there.
I would think they're
Oh,
concerned.
with
about-
semis.
They're concerned about the semis, not the cars.
Yeah, but
Cars
semis
too.
are more likely to turn
Combo.
south. That's what I'm hearing.
Huh?
Semis in terms of turning on.
Yeah.
55.
Are you talking about traffic in general, all the way up Pioneer?
I think
Past
the biggest concern is semi-trucks going
At the
north-
intersection?
North on Pioneer.
Right. That
So-
was my point about restricting the traffic.
Going north, yeah. So you could do it with an axle weight.
You could. But the thing I was proposing would also restrict car traffic.
Oh, going, but we haven't figured out a way to do that yet.
No, I was
I don't
just
think
gonna
we're going to
propose
tonight.
we do it similar to what Maple Grove required us to do on 101. That was my thought.
What they required us to do on 101.
Like a,
They didn't allow traffic from southbound 101 to turn into Maple Grove. So southbound traffic here off Pioneer would not be allowed to turn into this industrial development, which would limit traffic coming up from the north.
Yeah, from the north.
Right.
Yeah.
So it would push people from 55 off into it, and then theirs didn't allow traffic to make a right-hand turn onto 101. So it would limit traffic coming out going north.
So no right turn lane from this development. So have this and this only into the development?
Yeah, I'll show you a picture.
have no right turn lane on 62nd.
Can you show an
Yeah.
aerial picture of that, of
I think there's an in and an out from Maple Grove, so the movements that were restricted there was southbound left into that residential street, and then a through crossing, so if you're going east from Bellwether, you couldn't go
North
through.
Roman's easy.
Yeah,
There was still an in and an out of that neighborhood, you
So
could go.
cars could not go north on Pioneer out of this development.
Maybe you can
That's
pull
what
that
you-
up on Google
No
Earth.
vehicles could do that.
I think that's what he's.
This is what it's like.
They couldn't come south, but there's no way to stop them from turning right.
Actually, there is no way to turn south. Sorry.
So,
I think that's what he.
so these get,
I take that back. I see what you're saying.
So the movement that we're trying to limit, the right turn movement is really hard geometrically to
Yeah,
limit.
doesn't work.
I'm trying to pull up the aerial, but for
You
whatever
don't-
reason.
you don't need
it's
to
telling
unless
me
you wanna.
GIS is having system maintenance.
Mayor, could I offer another suggestion?
Sure.
Prove me
Yeah,
in.
John Roush here, but we've got, so Pella's gonna have between 10 and 15 trucks a day, consisting mostly of box trucks with a couple semis and 10 service vans. They'll be coming and going throughout the day. We'd be fine putting signage up, I don't know if it's enforceable or not, but no semis or tandem axles, or whatever we're gonna call it, no right turns. I mean, we don't want them going through the neighborhood anyway. The Park Place Storage condominiums, they're in Corcoran right now. They've got, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of square feet in the area. They don't have semis. Semis aren't allowed, and they can't make it in and through their space. And very frequently, you know, you're lucky to see one or two people. I've been in that place throughout the day. So we're willing to put a sign up, no semis movement to the north. And we don't know what's gonna happen, you know, with the other buildings that are gonna be, you know, ideally proposed, but just, they can't run their business, you know, if they can't get out on 55. So by pure nature of that, we're gonna be looking for low-traffic generators. I mean, nobody with the money to build a building like that's gonna go there if they can't get out and get access onto the interstate. So we're kind of self-governed that way. But anyway, that possible solution,
Thank you.
signage.
Yeah, can you clarify for me, Pella? The trucks that are coming in are bringing product in from their manufacturing facilities?
Can I have Joe speak to that? He just
Yeah.
handed me the paper here. He's been involved with planning their building. Hopefully I read that correctly.
Yeah, so Pella has a couple semis per day that brings product to the warehouse. And then from there, it's loaded onto various box trucks and vans and delivered to job sites.
So it's their delivery vehicles leaving the site, it's not contractors coming in and picking up product?
Correct.
Okay.
And I don't want to speak for them, but that's what they told me, is they have 10 service vans that are on site, and they have 10 to 15 trucks per day, mostly box trucks with a couple semis. The semis would be delivering the product. The box trucks or bringing the product from their manufacturer to the warehouse, and then the box trucks would be bringing it out to the various job sites.
I'm assuming the box trucks don't there's something that probably leave the site during more normal business hours
Yes,
versus the trucks coming in could come in later or earlier?
theoretically, yes.
Okay.
And if there's teeth to put into the snow right turn signage that we're suggesting, we're open to it. I don't know what we would,
Any thoughts on that?
what you could do, but
Yeah, I mean, it would be really an enforcement issue. I mean,
Could that come to development?
it's,
Well, we could, but it's the enforcement.
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's gonna be the no truck traffic and stuff. I mean, you're gonna have to, it's gonna be a challenge to try and enforce unless somebody's sitting there. You know, or we have to be, our traffic decisions obviously have to be based in, you know, what we're trying to accomplish. So that's why when you look at the weight restrictions or, you know, any of the traffic control devices, most of them are based on traffic studies from the engineers. So.
It's a pretty small number.
Yeah.
True, it's comforting.
You still
But we don't know what the other vacant lots would end up becoming.
True.
You talked about that from that end, but what stops the traffic moving from 19 to Pioneer and coming down? So
We gotta-
follow that as well?
We have to kind of limit some of the back and forth, but let's try to address that question.
I think it's the nature of the use, right? So if it's, what we've heard so far with the window manufacturer, distribution site, and the self-storage, there's not gonna be a lot of the public coming and going to that, and you don't know what the
Yeah.
others will be, but the initial uses that we're able to foresee shouldn't drive significant numbers of cars. By significant, I mean, you know, hundreds. You'll see dozens.
He said you still have people coming out.
Oh, really?
So, we have the option of the sign, which might not have teeth to it, but might still.
You can always put a sign up, but to Matt's point, how do you enforce it?
Right.
And how do you distinguish a truck coming, when you're a half mile down Pioneer, how do you distinguish a truck coming out of that development versus a truck that
Right.
came off 55?
You can't. You can't.
So, I think.
Unless you put a camera at the intersection.
Yeah, but even then.
I think we're ready.
I still think you could do axle.
Yeah, I think a
Axle
limit on
weight.
the road would be helpful. But for semis it would. Box trucks, I
Box
think typically
trucks are
aren't
gonna
over that,
fit.
but.
Well, I guess we haven't determined, I think semis are the biggest issue for people, but
I think they have the most impact individually, for sure.
You'll see box trucks whenever UPS drops off a package. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty common. Semis usually wouldn't be in a residential area.
So John, when we're saying potentially enforce through axle limit, are you talking about changing what we currently have, and is that an option?
can you change the, is it purely engineer, or can you do it to manipulate behavior?
Can you versus are you supposed to?
It's supposed to be based on what the road can carry.
That's,
Especially, I would say, you have to be cautious. I would need some assistance, be it if it's money that you've used state aid money on, I would want to double check that. So there's just some things we'd want to be aware of there. But road restrictions are generally based on what the road is built for. And that's why they're seasonal, because it can be impacted with the seasonal nature of.
and you can't put speed bumps on a state aid.
You can do what you want, there's just sometimes, you know. ramifications.
Or an additional stop sign.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are roads, we could have conversations about, you know, Pioneer Trail is a local road. We can do what we want within discretion. When you talk about the intersection of 19, that's county. When you talk about 55, that's state. So to do anything in those right-of-ways would require approvals.
when you zoom out to some of the other ones, like putting in a stop sign, I mean, most of the items like that go against the traffic design standards because stop signs don't in fact calm traffic, they increase it because you have the sound of stopping, the sound of accelerating. Same thing with, you can under-design a roadway, but at the end of the day, our community needs roadways that support, you know, if there's a crash, that you can divert traffic around. It's not ideal, but that's the reason why when we build our new roadways, we build them to certain standards, because there has to be a network, and the network has to support the traffic in the event of, you know, failures or necessary reroutes. But to your point, how do you change the day-to-day traffic? I think you're on the right track as far as how do you impact human behavior, what's going to be most convenient. And if there's a way to make it more convenient to not go through there, that's the route you need to look on. But changing the roadway design, when you look at the basics of engineering and what they've learned from the traffic studies and the effectiveness of speed bumps, stop signs, et cetera, you know, those types of things usually typically turn out to not be the solutions or have the desired impact that people have used them when they use them and they're not recommended from the studies.
Does the state aid road affect the equation we talked about with Corcoran Business Farms? About reducing speed limits and the traffic studies involved with that? Does it impact that?
I mean, it would have a similar application. They're both state aid routes.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Well,
Larkin
was
Road
too.
is on our state aid route list, so as well as Pioneer Trail.
Okay.
So, I mean, we would just want to dig into it a little bit, but
Potential route for speed.
you could always eliminate it from the state aid route, and then you'd have total control. When we talk about different options, that can be dug into a little bit, but, you know, usually the larger roads, those are the more expensive roads, and that's, you know, when you look at how you maximize your funding from the state, you want them on the busier roads, because it'll generate more revenue in their formula. So it's just a lot of moving parts. So generally, our policy's been the larger, heavier, busy roads are on our state aid roads.
We looked at a menu of roads, and basically there's a formula, and the best combination of like 5 roads included Pioneer, but the one underneath that, like, I'm just making it up, but like the 6th best one wasn't that far underneath
Okay.
Pioneer or whatever. It's not the end of the world to strip MSA funding from a road. If you wanted to do something to restrict traffic or to manipulate the road somehow, it could be done, and it wouldn't cost the city a lot of money in that MSA formula.
It's good to know.
It is. Now, would that be something we look at separately?
I don't know what we do, though.
Yeah,
That's the
that's
problem.
right.
There are no intersections on that road to put stop signs.
Right.
Not to say that I would go against what Matt said, but if we decided we're just gonna restrict access, we're limited because there aren't intersections.
Right.
In theory, you'd wanna curve it. You can't do that either. Make it really skinny, inconvenient.
So one thing you could think about, in Confessions of a Recovering Engineer, they talk about street design as the primary mechanism for controlling pedestrian safety. And it's not just necessarily stop signs or speed bumps, but the width of the lane, the proximity of different design features have an important impact on how drivers perceive a road and the speed that they feel safe driving at. You know, bike lanes are one way to do that. You could put maybe flexible delineators like those plastic poles on the shoulders as a way to narrow the perceived space for cars to slow things if that becomes a problem. I don't know if that makes sense on this road, but we're going to have future conversations about crosswalks across busy streets. We'll want to think about design elements that we're comfortable with as ways to regulate speed, apart from sticking cops on the corner with a radar gun, which doesn't really work. either.
So just a follow-up, yeah, it's like when it's a stated road and you need stated money, you have to follow their standards, which their standards are going to be, for that type of road, are going to be more for moving transportation and restricting it, so. Just an example of, yes, if it's a state aid road and you want to get money for it, you have to follow their standards. And I believe Pioneer Trail was built with state aid funds, I don't want to quote me, but in 12-plus years ago, 15 years ago, I'd have to confirm that, but I believe that's a state-funded route. So there might be a little bit, if we were to take ourselves off, there might be some payback of the state funds, because it's intended to last a certain amount of years. So if you take it off pre that, there's a little bit of payback for those funds that were spent. So it just gets.
That happened like 10, 12 years ago, where they actually changed the intersection too of 19 and Pioneer to be more of a 90-degree instead of the angle that it was.
And
I remember that.
County Road 19 project, the most recent one was a Hennepin County project that realigned that.
Yeah.
So it might have been more than 12 years ago, we'd have to look that up, but I do believe there was state money associated with that route, so to remove it, there might be some repayment that would have to be accomplished to take it off the system.
Still doesn't necessarily accomplish anything in and of itself.
It gives you a mechanism if you're not happy with the traffic flow. You can do things to discourage traffic, or at least make it seem less efficient.
Can I make a motion?
Yeah, please.
Can I motion we table this for 2 weeks?
Sure. Do we have a second?
We have till March 1st.
Correct. Do we have a second?
I'd second it.
What do we want to happen between now and then?
Yeah, I don't want to just keep dragging this community along either, so.
It's process. And it'll give us 2 weeks we have these humongous things that we've been thinking about that impact everybody. 2 weeks isn't going to kill a development, I don't think. And we have, instead of trying to come up with on the fly some solutions to some pretty big problems that we haven't been able to come up with, we'll have 2 weeks to think about it.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt.
I would agree.
Well, I'm fine tabling with. I would suggest that people that look at this project and think it's all bad should look at the last project we were hamstring into approving. Because I think they would, if Corcoran Business Farms was to be here, there'd be a lot more. I think this looks a lot better than that. Let me put it that way.
I think it does too. But maybe, but
I'm just saying.
I'm not saying that we'll come up with something.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say that to say we need to do this.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, the way our industrial code looks, the way that the letter of our ordinances read, this is a lot better than what it could be.
Yeah.
It is low-intensity uses for industrial.
Right, so if it really comes down to industrial versus commercial or anything else in our zoning, we as a council need to really consider about moving that to the forefront of our priorities and redesigning industrial and what industrial means.
After this, are there other industrial parcels?
Yes. Couple.
Applicants?
No.
Just potential.
Well, I'll make a motion to table it for 2 weeks.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
You can vote
We
nay.
had a second.
Nay, vote-
Second?
No, I'm fine with tabling.
Motion, second, Behrenkamp. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Do you need us to bring anything back? I'm not clear. If we're tabling it and you're expecting us to bring you something back in 2 weeks.
Signal lights.
Would everyone be comfortable with me meeting with staff and I can summarize the main things we?
I think you can. I'd like to get education out to people to what industrial really is like. How this is different than industrial.
Let's adjourn for 5 minutes.
We're just not.
I don't know what we're doing in the next 2 weeks, but I will talk.
Yeah, either we put up.